Detective Emery Cavill zipped his jacket up to his collar and got out of his patrol car. The October evening in the suburbs of Des Moines greeted him with a cold wind and light rain, turning the fallen leaves into a slippery mush under his feet. The red and blue flashes of police cars lit up the facades of the houses with an alarming light, and curious neighbors were already gathering behind the fence that the patrol officers had hastily erected around the two-story house at 237 Maple Street. It was already 10:30 in the evening, and most of the windows in the neighboring houses were lit with warm yellow light. People were getting ready for bed, unaware that a tragedy had occurred just a few steps away. "What do we have?" Cavill asked Sergeant Ramirez, who was the first to arrive at the scene. "Murder, sir. A woman 30 years old shot dead in her own living room. Her husband called the police at 10:45. He claims it was a robbery." Belinda Jerix approached her colleagues, shaking the rain from her hair. She carefully examined the house, neat, well-kept, with a small front garden. The lights were on in the first-floor windows, creating a deceptive impression of comfort and tranquility. "Where's the husband?" she asked. "Inside in the kitchen. Officer Brown is with him. The man is in shock but coherent. He said the burglar broke in through the back window around 10 o'clock. The detectives headed for the front door. The house was built in a traditional American style: white walls, dark green shutters, and a porch with wooden railings. Wilted chrysanthemums in a pot lay on the steps. Grace had apparently been preparing for the fall holidays. In the hallway, they were met by a heavy smell of gunpowder mixed with the aroma of coffee and homemade baking, a strange combination that immediately made the detectives wary. To the right of the entrance was a spacious living room, and that's where forensic expert Davis led them. "The body is here," he said, pointing to the sofa against the far wall. Grace Nolan was lying on her side, as if she had simply lain down to rest after a long day. Her dark hair was scattered across the cushions, and her face was frozen in a look of fear. She clearly hadn't expected to be attacked. Her pink dressing gown was stained with blood around her chest, where a single bullet hole gaped. Scattered magazines and a TV remote control lay on the floor next to the sofa. She had apparently been watching TV when it happened. "Was it a point-blank shot?" Jerix asked, leaning over the body. "Not exactly. Judging by the nature of the wound, the distance was about 2 to 3 meters. The bullet went through and lodged in the back of the sofa. Caliber .38, preliminary. Death was instantaneous." Cavill walked around the sofa, examining the scene. The living room wasn't as tidy as it had seemed at first. The coffee table had been pushed aside, and a broken coffee cup lay on the floor next to it. One of the floor lamps was tilted, as if someone had knocked it over in a hurry. A decorative vase on the mantelpiece had been knocked over, spilling dried flowers onto the floor. "There was definitely some commotion here," he remarked, "but it doesn't look like a serious struggle." "The husband said his wife screamed when she saw the burglar," Davis added. "She may have tried to escape, but she didn't get far." Jerix walked over to the fireplace, above which hung the Nolan couple's wedding photos. In the pictures, the young couple looked happy. Grace was smiling radiantly in her white dress, and Thaddeus was holding her around the waist. Next to them were photos from their honeymoon: a beach, palm trees, the sun setting over the ocean. The wedding had taken place only 3 months ago, judging by the date on one of the frames. "Newlyweds," she said quietly, "just starting out together." Family photos stood on the mantelpiece: Grace's parents, some relatives, friends at parties, the ordinary life of an ordinary family that had been tragically cut short. "Let's go talk to her husband," Jerix suggested. They walked through a small dining room into the kitchen, where a tall man in his mid-30s was sitting at a round table. Thaddeus Nolan looked shaken. His dark face was pale and his eyes red from crying. He was dressed in casual clothes, gray sweatpants and a blue t-shirt. Next to him stood Patrolman Brown, writing down statements in a notebook. "Mr. Nolan? I'm Detective Cavill, and this is my partner, Detective Jerix. We're sorry for your loss." Thaddeus raised his head and swallowed hard. "Thank you. I still can't believe it's true. I understand this is difficult for you, but we need to find out what happened here. Tell us everything from the beginning." The man ran his hand over his face and began to speak slowly. "We spent the whole evening at home. Grace made dinner, We ate, watched some TV. Around 9, she decided to take a bath before going to bed. I stayed in the living room, flipping through the channels. Then I went down to the basement. We have a small workshop there, to finish a bookshelf. How long were you in the basement? 40 minutes, maybe a little more. I got caught up in my work and lost track of time. Around 10, I went upstairs and saw that the light was on in the living room, but Grace wasn't there. I thought she had gone to bed. Cavill nodded, giving him time to collect his thoughts. What happened next? I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water and suddenly heard the sound of breaking glass. It was coming from the kitchen. I turned around and saw that the back window was broken and a man in dark clothes was standing in the doorway. Describe him. He was of average height and thin. He was wearing a ski mask so I couldn't see his face. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He was holding a gun in his hand, a small, shiny one. What did he do? Tadeus paused for a few seconds, as if reliving those terrifying moments. He pointed the gun at me and ordered me not to move. He spoke quietly but very threateningly. Then he asked where the money and jewelry were. I told him everything was in the safe upstairs. Where was your wife at that moment? I thought she was upstairs in the bedroom, but then the robber told me to go to the living room, and there we saw Grace. She must have heard the noise and came down to see what was going on. Thaddeus's voice faltered, and he paused to compose himself. When she saw the burglar, she screamed, very loudly. I shouted at her to calm down, that everything would be all right. But this man, he got angry. He said he didn't want the neighbors to hear her screaming and call the police. And then he shot her? Yes. Grace tried to run to the stairs, but he shot her in the back. She fell right onto the sofa. Tears rolled down the man's cheeks. Jerix pushed a box of tissues toward him. Mr. Nolan, I understand how difficult this is, but we need to know all the details. What happened after the shot? I rushed to Grace, but it was too late. The robber put the gun to my head and said he'd kill me too if I didn't show him where the safe was. I had to take him upstairs. Who knew the combination to the safe? Only Grace and I. It's the date we first met, 08/03/2022. And you opened the safe? I had no choice. There was about $5,000 in cash and Grace's jewelry, her grandmother's engagement ring, earrings I gave her for her birthday, and a few other pieces. What did the burglar do next? He took everything and left the same way he came in, through the kitchen window. I tried to stop him, but he pointed the gun at me again. He said that if I called the police before half an hour had passed, he would come back and finish me off. So you waited until 10:45? Yes. I was afraid he was nearby and watching. I sat next to Grace, held her hand, and waited. It was the most terrifying half hour of my life. The detectives listened carefully to the story. It sounded logical and consistent, but they still had questions. Mr. Nolan, did the robber have an accent? Was there anything unusual about his speech? No, just a normal voice. He spoke clearly, without an accent. He seemed quite young to me. What about his height and build? About my height, maybe a little shorter. Thin, but not skinny. He moved quickly and confidently. Did you notice any tattoos, scars, or any distinguishing features? He was fully clothed, even his hands were gloved. The only thing that stood out was his expensive sneakers. They were white and looked new. Cavill noted this detail. Robbers don't usually show off expensive shoes. Did it seem like this man knew the layout of the house? Did he find his way to the safe right away? I led him there, but yes, he didn't get lost or look around. It was as if he knew where he was going. Mr. Nolan, did you and your wife have any enemies? People who might have wanted to harm you? Thaddeus shook his head. No, we lived a quiet, peaceful life. Grace worked as a nurse at St. Anne's Hospital. Everyone loved her, her patients and her colleagues. I'm a manager at Fresh Mart Supermarket. We're just ordinary people. Any financial problems? Debts? No debts. We bought the house on a mortgage, but the payments aren't high. We're thrifty people. We live within our means. Who could have known about the money in the safe? We didn't tell anyone. Maybe Grace's parents guessed we were saving something, but they didn't know the exact amount. The detectives asked to see the safe and the place where the break-in had occurred. Going up to the second floor, they examined the couple's bedroom. The room was decorated in warm colors: beige walls, dark brown furniture, family photos on the nightstands. The safe was indeed behind the dresser, its door wide open. "An expensive model," Cavill remarked. "With an electronic lock. It's almost impossible to break into without knowing the combination." He crouched down and examined the lock. There were no signs of tampering. The safe had been opened with the correct combination. Going back down to the kitchen, the detectives carefully examined the place where the break-in had occurred. The window faced the backyard, which was hidden from view by a high wooden fence. The glass was broken, and shards lay both outside and inside the kitchen. The frame was damaged, indicating that the window had been broken from the outside. "It's easy to climb through this window," Jerick's remarked, "and the neighbors wouldn't see you. There were wet footprints on the windowsill and floor. Apparently the burglar came here in the rain." Davis had already collected samples of dirt for analysis. "Do you have any security cameras?" Cavill asked. "No, we didn't think it was necessary. It's a quiet neighborhood. Nothing like this has ever happened before." "What about the neighbors?" "I don't know. We're not very close with our neighbors." After examining the scene, the detectives went outside. The rain intensified, and they hurried to take shelter in the car. "What do you think?" Jerick asked. "The story makes sense. The details add up. The window was definitely broken from the outside, and there are signs that someone else was in the house. But something bothers me. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's all too smooth." "What do you mean?" "The burglar arrives just when the husband is in the basement. The wife happens to come down at the worst possible moment. He kills her but doesn't touch her husband. He knows where the safe is but doesn't know the combination." "You think it's a setup?" "I don't know. It's too early to draw conclusions. We need to check the alibis, talk to the neighbors, and look into the family's financial situation." "What about a motive? Why would Thaddeus kill his wife, whom he just married?" "That's what we have to find out." Cavill started the engine but didn't rush to drive off. Raindrops tapped against the car windows, and red and blue police lights continued to illuminate the grim scene. Something about this case made him feel uneasy, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The next morning, the police station on East Grand Avenue greeted the detectives with its usual hustle and bustle. Cavill arrived at work at 7 in the morning, as usual, and immediately immersed himself in the case files on the murder of Grace Nolan. He had spent a restless night. The story Thaddeus had told him seemed logical and coherent, but experience told him that the most plausible versions were sometimes false. Jerick appeared half an hour later with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of donuts from a nearby coffee shop. She looked as tired as her partner. Clearly, the case was on her mind, too. "Anything new?" she asked, settling down at her desk opposite Cavill. "I got the preliminary report from the forensic team. The bullet is indeed a .38 caliber, fired from a Smith & Wesson revolver. There are very few fingerprints at the crime scene, only those of the Nolan family, and a few unidentified prints on the handle of the broken window and the windowsill." "So the robber was wearing gloves, just like Thaddeus said?" "Yes. We also found traces of dirt on the kitchen floor. Samples have been sent for analysis. With any luck, we'll be able to determine where the killer came from." Jerick took a sip of coffee and opened a folder with photos of the crime scene. "What about the neighbors? Did anyone hear the shot?" "Oh, here's the interesting part. I contacted the patrol officers who interviewed the residents of the neighboring houses last night. No one heard a shot around 10 o'clock, although a .38 caliber is pretty loud. Maybe the TVs drowned out the sound, or the rain?" "Possibly. But the house on the left is empty. The owners are on vacation. And on the right lives an elderly couple, the Collinses. They usually go to bed early and may not have heard anything." Cavill flipped through the pages of the report. "One more detail. The time of death, according to preliminary medical examiner reports, is between 10:30 and 11 p.m. that matches the husband's story. Does he have an alibi?" "Not formally. He claims he was in the basement, but no one can confirm that. Although I went down there myself, and there is indeed a workshop, with tools laid out and an unfinished shelf on the workbench. So he could have been telling the truth about what he was doing. Or he could have been trying to make it look that way. An experienced carpenter could have made a shelf like that in half an hour, but this looks like it took several hours." Jerick thoughtfully twirled a pencil in her hands. What exactly bothers you about his story? Several things. First, the robber's behavior. Why kill a woman if she just screamed? It would have been enough to threaten her with a weapon to silence her. Murder attracts unnecessary attention. Maybe he got scared and fired impulsively? Then why didn't he kill the husband? He was still a witness. Second, those expensive sneakers that Thaddeus noticed. A strange detail for a robbery. And the third thing? For some reason, the robber knew for sure that there was money in the house. Usually, criminals search the house first, looking for valuables. Jerix nodded, agreeing with her partner's logic. Maybe he was watching the family, studying their habits? Possibly. But then he would have had to know that Thaddeus often went down to the basement in the evenings. The risk of being seen was minimal. The detectives decided to talk to Thaddeus again, but this time at the station. A formal interrogation would help them better assess his reactions and identify any possible contradictions. At 10 in the morning, Thaddeus Nolan was sitting in the interrogation room, a small room with bare walls, a metal table, and 3 chairs. He looked a little better after a night's sleep. He had taken a shower and changed into clean clothes, but his eyes were still red from grief. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Nolan," Cavill began, turning on the tape recorder. "We need to clarify some details for the record. Of course, anything that will help find my wife's killer. Tell me again about last night, in great detail, starting with dinner." Thaddeus gathered his thoughts and began. "Grace made spaghetti with meat sauce, my favorite dish. We had dinner around 7, then cleared the table. Grace wanted to watch a movie on TV, and I decided to go down to the basement and work on a bookshelf for her. I wanted to surprise her for her birthday." "When is Grace's birthday?" "In 2 weeks, on November 15th. She'll be 31. Jerix wrote the date in her notebook. "How long were you in the basement?" "About 40 minutes. It's painstaking work that requires attention." Time flew by unnoticed. "Did you hear any noises from above? Voices? Footsteps?" "No, it's pretty quiet in the basement. It's well soundproofed, and I turned on the radio to make the work more enjoyable." "What station?" "A local station. They play jazz and blues. I don't remember exactly, but the tuning knob is always set to that station." Cavill noted that the details still matched. Thaddeus answered confidently, without getting confused in his statements. "What made you go upstairs at that particular moment?" "I wanted a drink of water, and I thought Grace must have gone to bed. I wanted to say goodnight to her." "And then you heard the sound of breaking glass?" "Yes. It was very loud. It scared me. At first, I thought Grace had dropped something in the kitchen." "Describe the burglar's appearance again." "He was of average height and slim. His face was completely hidden by a ski mask. He was wearing a dark jacket, blue jeans, and white sneakers. The gun was small and chrome-plated. He moved confidently, without fussing around." "Did he say anything other than demanding to see the safe?" Thaddeus thought for a moment. "Yes, when Grace screamed, he said, 'Shut her up or I'll shoot everyone.' And after the shot, he added, 'You should have listened.'" "Was the voice young or mature?" "Young, about 25 to 30. He spoke quietly but very threateningly." "Any accent? Anything distinctive about his speech?" "Normal speech, no accent. Maybe a little rough, but not country." Jerix leaned forward. "Mr. Nolan, do you think this man knew the layout of your house?" "I'm not sure. I led him to the safe, so it's hard to say." "Did he know about the safe beforehand?" "It seems so. He immediately asked where the money and jewelry were, and when I said they were in the safe, he didn't seem surprised." "Who could have known about your savings?" "Grace and I didn't advertise it. My parents might have guessed that we were saving for the future, but they didn't know the exact amount." "Colleagues?" "No, we didn't discuss personal finances with colleagues." "Friends?" "No, we rarely talked about money at all." Cavill stood up and began pacing the room. "Mr. Nolan, have you had any strange phone calls lately? People asking about your plans, your daily routine?" "No, nothing like that." "How about surveillance? Have you noticed the same car near your house?" "No, not really, although I'm not very observant about things like that." "Did you have any enemies? People who might hold a grudge?" Thaddeus shook his head. "We're both easygoing people. We try not to get into arguments with anyone. Grace was loved by all her colleagues at the hospital, and I have a good relationship with my co-workers at the store." What about ex-partners? Grace or you? Grace had a boyfriend in college, but that was a long time ago. They broke up on good terms. As for me, I didn't have anything serious before I met Grace. Financial problems? Debts? Just a mortgage on the house, but the payments aren't critical. We hardly use credit cards and live within our means. Life insurance? Yes, we both have insurance through our employers. Standard policies, nothing special. The interrogation continued for another hour, but no new details emerged. Thaddeus answered all questions openly and consistently, showing no signs of deception or nervousness. After he left, the detectives remained in the interrogation room, mulling over what they had heard. Either he's telling the truth, or he's very well prepared, said Jerix. I'm inclined to believe the former, but my intuition tells me we're missing something. Maybe the problem isn't with him, but with our understanding of the robber's motives? Possibly. Let's go to the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors. Maybe someone saw something suspicious. Maple Street looked completely different during the day than it had the night before. The sun was peeking through the clouds, illuminating the neat lawns and trees in their autumn foliage. The Nolan house was still cordoned off with police tape, but most of the investigation had already been completed. They visited the house on the left first. The owners were indeed on vacation, but their son Marcus, a student at a local college, had come by to check the mail and water the flowers. I heard what happened, said the young man, letting the detectives into the house. It's a terrible story. Grace was a very nice woman. Did you know the Nolan family? Not very well, but we said hello and sometimes talked over the fence. They were recently married and seemed happy. Have you noticed anyone suspicious in the neighborhood? Maybe in the last few days? Marcus thought for a moment. No, nothing out of the ordinary. It's a quiet neighborhood. Everyone knows each other. Were you home last night? No, I was at a friend's house. I didn't get back until this morning and saw the police cars. The next house was to the right of the Nolans. An elderly couple lived there, Edward and Dolores Collins. Mrs. Collins greeted them eagerly. Come in, please, she invited the detectives into the cozy living room. Would you like some coffee? I just made some fresh. Thank you, we'd love some, Cavil replied. While the hostess prepared the coffee, the detectives looked around. The house was furnished in an old-fashioned style, with family photographs of several generations hanging on the walls. We're investigating the murder of Grace Nolan, Jerix began when everyone had sat down at the table. Did you hear anything suspicious last night? My husband is a little hard of hearing, and I went to bed early, Mrs. Collins replied. Around 9 o'clock, I started to have a headache and had to take some medicine. And during the day, did you see any strangers? The elderly woman frowned, trying to remember. Now that you mention it, yes, there was something strange. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, I was watering the flowers on the porch and noticed a young man. He was standing on the sidewalk across from the Nolan's house, looking at their windows. Cavil's heart began to race. Please describe him. A young African-American man, thin, dark hair, jeans, and a dark jacket. About 25, no older. He seemed suspicious to me. He was staring at the house too intently. How long was he standing there? 5 minutes, maybe a little longer. Then he walked toward the bus stop. Would you be able to recognize him if you saw him again? I think so. I have a good memory for faces. This was the first lead that could confirm the robbery theory. The detectives agreed that Mrs. Collins would come to the station to help create a sketch. 2 hours later, forensic artist Tom Wilson was working at the station. Mrs. Collins patiently answered his questions, helping him recreate the stranger's appearance. The face is oval, not round. The nose is straight, quite narrow. The eyes are dark, slightly slanted. The chin is pointed, with no facial hair. Gradually, a portrait of a young man with a thin face and an attentive gaze appeared on the computer screen. Mrs. Collins made the final adjustments. Yes, that's very similar, she nodded. That's exactly how I remember him. When the sketch was ready, the detectives called Thaddeus. He arrived at the station half an hour later, still looking dejected but ready to cooperate. Mr. Nolan, look at this portrait, Cavil said, showing him the image. Does this face look familiar to you? Thaddeus took the composite sketch in his hands and studied it closely. For a few seconds, his face lit up with recognition. It's him! He exclaimed. That's the man who killed Grace. Are you sure? Absolutely. Despite the mask, I remember his eyes, the shape of his face. It's definitely him. Do you know who he is? Have you met this man before? Thaddeus stared intently at the portrait, but then shook his head. No, I've never seen him before. I have no idea who he could be. Think hard. Maybe he works at the store where you buy groceries, or at the bank. No, I would remember. He's a complete stranger. Could Grace have known him? I don't think so. She would have told me if she had problems with someone. After Thaddeus left, the detectives discussed the new information. So we have a witness and a suspect, Jarek said. And his husband recognized him. That clears Thaddeus of suspicion. Not entirely. He could have hired a hit man. Then why identify him? It would have been more logical to say he didn't recognize him. Cavill nodded, agreeing with his partner's logic. Let's start searching for the sketch. Maybe this guy has been in trouble with the police before. Over the next 2 days, detectives Cavill and Jarek actively searched for the suspect using the sketch. The image was sent to all patrol cars, published in local news, and posted on bulletin boards in public places. Several people called the station claiming to have seen a young man who looked like the suspect, but all the leads turned out to be false. On Wednesday morning, dispatcher Susan Riley called the station. We have some information on the sketch, she told Cavill. A man called and said he saw this guy the night before last at the Blue Moon Bar on Union Street. Who called? He gave his name as Leon Hart and said he works as a bartender. He claims this man is a regular at the bar. Thanks, Susan. We're on our way. Cavill shared the news with Jarek, and half an hour later they were parking outside a small bar in the business district. The Blue Moon was located in the basement of an old brick building, and even in the daytime, the neon sign flickered dimly in the window. Inside, the place looked typical for such establishments. Dim lighting, dark wood furniture, a long bar with mirrors behind it. Quiet jazz music played in the corner, and the air was thick with the smell of cigarettes and alcohol. There were few visitors during the day, a couple of middle-aged men at a corner table and a lone customer at the bar. Behind the bar stood a tall, dark-skinned man in his 40s with a neatly trimmed beard. He was wiping glasses with a white towel and looked like a man who knew his business. Leon Hart? Cavill addressed him, showing his badge. Detectives Cavill and Jarek. You called about the sketch. Yes, that's me. Welcome to the Blue Moon. The bartender put down the towel and looked closely at the detectives. Would you like something to drink? Coffee, perhaps? Coffee would be nice, Jarek agreed. Leon poured 2 cups of hot coffee and pushed them toward the detectives. So, do you recognize the man in the sketch? Cavill began. Absolutely. Hunter Fosterly, 25 years old. He's a regular here, comes in 3 or 4 times a week. Quiet guy, but sometimes he drinks more than he should. Does he come alone? No, usually with a friend. They always sit at that table in the corner. Leon pointed to a secluded spot away from the main room. They talk quietly, don't attract attention. Describe this friend. An older man, about 35, average height, well-dressed. They're very close, if you know what I mean. Jarek exchanged glances with her partner. The description could fit many people. Can you describe him in more detail? Dark-skinned, like Hunter, short hair, always neatly combed, wears business suits or shirts, looks like an office worker or manager, speaks politely, well-mannered. How long have they known each other? 8 months, maybe 9. They first came here last winter. At first they were wary, but then they settled in. Has anything changed in their behavior lately? Leon thought for a moment, continuing to wipe the glasses. Yes. About 3 months ago, they started coming less often, and when they did come, there was tension between them. Hunter drank more than usual, and his friend looked worried. Did they argue? Not openly, but it was clear they had problems. Hunter would sometimes raise his voice and gesticulate. His friend would try to calm him down. Did you hear what they were talking about? I don't eavesdrop on customers' conversations, but once I heard Hunter say something about a wedding and betrayal. He seemed very upset. Cavill felt his heartbeat quicken. The mention of a wedding in the context of their business couldn't be a coincidence. Were they here on Monday evening? Hunter came in, but he was alone. He drank quite a lot and was clearly upset. He left around 9 o'clock. What condition was he in? Drunk, but not heavily. He could walk on his own and was coherent, but he was very angry, muttering something under his breath. Jerix took out her notebook. "Mr. Hart, do you have any information about where Hunter lives? Or his friend?" "I don't know their addresses. Hunter pays cash, and his friend sometimes uses a card, but I don't remember the details." "What's his friend's name?" "He just called himself T, short for something, I guess." Cavill and Jerix exchanged glances again. T could be short for Thaddeus. "Mr. Hart, we're going to show you some photos. Look at them carefully and tell us if you recognize anyone." Jerix took a wedding photo of Thaddeus and Grace Nolan from the folder they had taken from the house during the search. She showed the photo to the bartender, pointing to the bride. "Does this face look familiar to you?" Leon took the photo and studied it closely. "A beautiful couple, but no, I've never seen this woman before." "And the man?" The bartender looked at the groom and froze. His face showed surprise, turning to shock. "My God, it's Ty, Hunter's friend." The air in the bar seemed to thicken. The detectives felt the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together into a terrifying picture. "Are you sure?" Cavill asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Absolutely. It's definitely him. Only in the photo he's wearing a suit, and here he usually came in more casual clothes." "So this man was in a relationship with Hunter Fosterly?" "Yes, they were definitely a couple. Hunter loved him very much, it was obvious. And this man, he seemed troubled lately." Jerix put the photo away. "Thanks for the information, Mr. Hart. If Hunter shows up here again, call us immediately. Don't try to detain him yourself." "Of course. I hope he's okay?" "We can't discuss the details of the investigation. Thanks again." Leaving the bar, the detectives got into the car, but Cavill was in no hurry to start the engine. The information they had received changed the whole case dramatically. "Thaddeus deceived us," said Jerix. "He was having an affair with this Hunter. And judging by the bartender's words, it was serious. Hunter saw Thaddeus's marriage as a betrayal. So the motive for the murder is jealousy. Hunter couldn't accept that his lover had married a woman. But why did Thaddeus hide this from us? He knew we'd find out the truth anyway. Maybe he hoped Hunter wouldn't be found. Or he was afraid his orientation would become public knowledge." Cavill started the engine. "Let's go to his place. It's time for some honest talk." The Nolan house looked lifeless. The police tape had been removed, but the windows remained tightly curtained. Thaddeus didn't open the door right away, apparently not expecting visitors. "Detectives, has something happened? Did you find the killer?" "Mr. Nolan, we need to talk. Can we come in?" "Of course." They entered the living room, where the smell of gunpowder still lingered. The sofa where Grace had died was covered with a white sheet. "Mr. Nolan, we were at the Blue Moon Bar," Cavill began without preamble. Thaddeus's face changed instantly. All the blood drained from him and he sank heavily into a chair. "The bartender identified you as a regular customer. You were with Hunter Fosterly." The room was silent for several seconds. Thaddeus covered his face with his hands. "You knew Hunter before your wife was murdered," Jerix continued. "What's more, you had a close relationship with him."